This is a story of missed opportunities. Of how New York's finest repeatedly failed to snare the Mafia's most bloodthirsty killer. Roy DeMeo.
What Henry Ford was to automobile industry, Roy was to killing. He streamlined it, he organized it, and he killed with efficiency.
In the 1970s, DeMeo embarked, unchecked, on a murder spree.
But when Roy killed you, your body was not found.
His victims may have numbered as many as 200 people.
Roy DeMeo was as guilty as any serial killer. Not only did he kill them, he cut their bodies up and defamed them and their humanity forever.
People would be killed because they happened to accompany a target.
If you looked up the word evil in the dictionary, his picture would be there.
The big question is, why didn't the police and the FBI stop Roy DeMeo sooner? In 1975, detectives working for the New York Organized Crime Squad made a gruesome discovery. It was a quiet Sunday in Queens. Here, in an alleyway behind the Pantry Pride meat market, the police discovered the remains of a young adult male, stuffed in various garbage bags. The victim was Andre Katz, a small-time criminal.
Andre Katz was a car thief, a very, very good car thief. And he was supplying cars to body and fender places, and he was supplying cars to used car lots.
Katz came from what was then a dangerous part of town, the Canarsie district of Brooklyn. During the 1970s, Canarsie was the city's car crime epicenter. It was infamous for its body shops, garages, and salvage yards. Back then, many of the garages were so-called chop shops, specializing in cannibalizing stolen cars for the parts. But as the discovery of Katz's body showed, somebody had been chopping up more than just cars. No one would realize then that this gruesome discovery was the first clue in one of the most shocking crime sprees ever, begun by one of the Mafia's most bloody murderers, Roy DeMeo. Roy DeMeo's life could have been very different. His mother had wanted him to be a doctor. An uncle was a big-shot prosecutor. Another was a forensic scientist. But Roy DeMeo never showed such promise. After a start as a delivery boy and part-time apprentice butcher, he finally settled on a life of crime instead. By the late 1960s, Roy DeMeo was doing well for himself in his chosen career. He was a successful street thug and racketeer. But DeMeo wanted more. He yearned to become a made man, a fully paid-up member of a Mafia crime family. And soon, he got what he had always wanted. One day, he received a call. Somebody was looking for a meeting. The call came from this house. It was the home of Nino Gadji. Gaggi was a mafia captain in the infamous Gambino crime family of New York.
He was brought into the operation by Nino Gaggi, and Nino Gaggi worked for Paul Castellano, who was the head of the Gambino family.
The Gambinos were the most powerful of the 5 crime families that ran the New York underworld. For DeMeo, it was an honor. A meeting with Nino Gaggi could be the first step on the path to becoming made. Gaggi placed DeMeo on the first rung of the Mafia ladder. He was made an associate, working in partnership with Nino on various schemes to increase each other's wealth. DeMeo's business interests were a perfect match: loan sharking, gambling, theft. The honeymoon started well. DeMeo expanded his loan shark book. And soon, Roy DeMeo was doing what any mafia boss wants. He was making lots and lots of money. But DeMeo was more than just a loan shark. He was an entrepreneur. He also started to eye up other areas of criminality, like pornography. At this time, hardcore pornography was illegal. Some family bosses, including the Gambinos, frowned upon it. But DeMeo decided it was too good an opportunity to pass up. Nino Gaggi turned a blind eye for one simple reason: the money was excellent. To help him enforce his deals, DeMeo built around him his own specialist team of criminals. It became known as the DeMeo Crew. Each member had their own area of expertise. It included Chris Harvey, real name Rosenberg, a 24-year-old with a vicious temper and a love of fast cars and drugs.
Chris idolized Roy. He wanted to be Roy. He wanted to be in the mob.
Freddie DeMeo, he was their getaway driver.
Freddie was a racing car driver and was highly respected as a car thief. He could get away with any kind of a police chase.
Other crew members included Joey Testa and Anthony Center, who were so close they were nicknamed the Twins. In all, it was a curious mix of characters, but they were united in their admiration of DeMeo.
They looked at him as a father image. As he moved up the line, he'd be able to move them up the line. Roy was a father figure, a mentor, and their boss.
The gang used to hang out at a bar here on Flatlands Avenue, Brooklyn. Today, it is a church, but at the time, it was called the Gemini Lounge and was the DeMeo gang's clubhouse and base for operations.
Gemini Lounge was a neighborhood watering hole. Wasn't a disco, it was a very quiet bar where a man coming home from work could go in for a drink. The only exception to it was the fact that it was owned by Roy DeMeo.
From his base at the Gemini Lounge, DeMeo started to expand his criminal operation.
Roy was an entrepreneur. He looked at many ways of expanding his business, and he did it tremendously well.
In 1972, he pulled off an extraordinary feat for a career criminal. He moved into the world of finance and got himself elected to the board of directors of a small bank, the Brooklyn Credit Union.
Originally, Roy got involved on the orders of Nino to help launder money.
But DeMeo didn't stop there. He saw an opportunity to steal cash as well as launder it.
So what had happened is Roy moved into it, organized it, but then took it a step further.
DeMeo began to embezzle money. He plundered the bank's capital and got other directors to do the same. By the time he had finished, it went bankrupt. By then, it had netted him and Nino Gaggi hundreds of thousands of dollars. The collapse of a bank, even a small one, could have been a disaster for DeMeo. Because the FBI and tax authorities started to investigate the failure of the credit union. But both Gaggi and DeMeo had already moved on, and nothing could be pinned on them. The result? They were free.
Then they just walked away from it.
DeMeo had managed to elude the authorities. Now, he thought he could get away with anything. Even murder. By 1973, Roy DeMeo was 32. His pornography business was doing well, but DeMeo felt it could do even better. Then, one of his business associates, Paul Rothenberg, was arrested. With Rothenberg under pressure, Roy DeMeo feared he might reveal his own part in the industry, so he planned to take action. In July 1973, he coolly picked Rothenberg up and drove him to a quiet part of town. It was his very first kill. The execution changed him. He found that killing gave him power. He would now not hesitate to murder again whenever an obstacle presented itself. The opportunity to do more killings soon arose, due to DeMeo's increasing interest in another profitable business, car theft. The DeMeo crew was becoming big in lucrative car crime.
They had a highly set up organization of 17 to 20 car thieves a night.
In New York, there was huge amounts of money to be made. A car was often worth more for spares than as a running vehicle.
And everybody had their order. Everybody knew their assignment.
Cars were stolen by his crew and either given new identities or broken down in the Canarsie chop shops.
They were not just to go out to steal any car. They knew exactly what kind of a car they had to steal.
Somebody would want a Jaguar, somebody would want a Cadillac, somebody would want a Porsche. They would steal on order the exact car they wanted, the model, the year, the whole routine. Any luxury car you need parts for eventually. So what they started to do then was chop them up and sell the parts. I mean, it was a very lucrative business.
It was at the height of all this that local car criminal and associate of DeMeo, Andre Katz, got into trouble with the police.
Andre got pinched for narcotics. And they were afraid he would rat out to the police.
Fearing that Katz would squeal, he consulted his mentor, Nino Gaggi.
So after having a meeting with Roy and his capo, Nino Gaggi, the order came down was to kill Andre Katz.
DeMeo prepared an elaborate plan. Katz was lured by a female accomplice into a trap.
He was grabbed by them and they put a noose around his head and dragged him into a car.
Then, DeMeo and his crew took Katz to the Pantry Pride meat market in Queens. But this time, DeMeo did something different. Inspired by the surroundings, he put his training as an apprentice butcher to good use. That's how Andre Katz ended up in pieces in several garbage bags.
The next thing you see is the headlines. This is a dismembered body found in the back of Pantry Pride. And what a bum thought was a leg of lamb was actually Andre's thigh with a tattoo on it. They wrapped it all up in butcher paper and it was neatly placed in the fat disposal bin behind Pantry Pride.
In fact, DeMeo had made a mistake. The body parts were found because the rubbish wasn't collected over the weekend. But yet again, DeMeo got away with it. The 1975 police investigation into Katz's murder failed to discover the gang's involvement. No witnesses came forward. No incriminating evidence was found. For retired homicide detective Joe Wendling, the reason was because Katz was the wrong kind of victim.
If it's a store owner and he's killed, there's the outcry. But when an organized crime figure is killed, there is not that much outcry. There's not that much interest that the other detectives place. And I viewed this as a tremendous weakness. And I always went to my boss, and sometimes I had to get down on my hands and knees and beg him, is to let me look into the homicide.
Now, Roy DeMeo began to get a taste for this way of killing.
Roy DeMeo was probably one of the most vicious, uncaring lowlifes that I ever came across.
Dismemberment was rarely used by the Mafia, but for DeMeo, it now became his signature.
He had no respect for human life. He had no respect for anybody except himself. If you looked up the word evil in the dictionary, his picture would be there.
DeMeo found that anyone could be made to disappear.
They would cut the body up, dismember the body, neatly wrap the body, and the parts were placed in dumpsters.
The dumpsters were emptied, and the contents taken to the immense Fountain Avenue dump in Brooklyn.
All of the garbage from Brooklyn and Queens went to that dump.
And the Fountain Avenue dump had a special area designated for meat byproducts. And it had to be covered immediately with dirt. Then the bulldozers covered everything.
So if you dump something there, you're not going to find it ever, ever, ever. So that's why they used it.
More and more people started to vanish.
We had a number of people that disappeared, and we never found them. Here was a group of men that were murdering people, and the bodies were never found.
Today, the dump has long since been filled and landscaped. There is little clue as to the number of bodies DeMeo sent there. As well as using the dump, the crew also disposed of their victims another way.
They dumped a lot of the bodies in the Atlantic Ocean, too. They cut the bodies up, put them in hefty bags, and dumped them off a boat out in the middle of the ocean.
DeMeo became more and more skilled at his job. He was getting so proficient that even the family boss, Paul Castellano came calling for his hitman services. He had found out that his son-in-law was cheating on his daughter.
One of the bodies was Paul Castellano's son-in-law, and she had a miscarriage because she caught him cheating on her. And Paul had DeMeo kill his son-in-law.
Again, the body was never found. Amazingly, despite all the disappearances, the police department failed to spot a pattern, except one person, Detective Joe Wendling. First Wendling, and then another colleague in auto crimes, John Murphy, spotted something. All these murders were linked to the world of car theft.
I developed an informant that said, look at the amount of car thieves that are disappearing. I think they're cutting them up, and that's why we're not finding them.
But despite his lead, no one took it further. Few shared Wendling's enthusiasm to investigate deeper. In fact, the forces of law and order were in crisis. Financial mismanagement meant recruitment of police was frozen. Morale was low, and the public's faith in the police department had sunk to pitiful levels. The auto crimes unit was overstretched, and the FBI were not interested in local car crime. So these were great times for DeMeo. With nothing to stop him, business boomed. 77,000 cars were stolen in New York City in 1974 alone.
No area in the country is safe from the car thief. It affects everybody in the country. The big metropolitan areas, however, are suffering the most rapid rate of growth.
For DeMeo, the money kept flooding in.
Oh, it was a tremendous epidemic of car crimes in New York. And there was a tremendous slew of warehouses found with skeletons of cars in them.
However, DeMeo wasn't having it all his own way. Another law enforcement unit was looking at his crew's meetings at the Gemini Lounge. It was a separate outfit, the Organized Crime Task Force of the Queen's District Attorney's Office and Detective Kenny McCabe.
Kenny was the intelligence officer of the DA's office. He maintained all the organized crime files. He covers all the funerals. He covers all the weddings. And he writes his little notes, and he has folders upon folders of all the families.
Then, Joe Wendling, John Murphy, and Kenny McCabe did what the wider law enforcement community were failing to do. They started comparing notes. Convinced DeMeo was involved in murder, the men started surveillance, but they could only do so in their own time. What had escaped them, though, was that DeMeo had just received a massive promotion. In 1977, Roy DeMeo got what he had always wanted. He became a fully paid-up mobster and was formally inducted into the Mafia crime family.
There was two ways of being made in the mob. You become an earner or you become a hitter, right? You kill somebody, you earn. Roy DeMeo was both.
Roy DeMeo became a so-called made man, working full-time for capo Nino Gaggi. It was a huge moment in DeMeo's life and the realization of a dream. So DeMeo and his crew were over the moon. With this elation came more murders. It was going so well, the crew even took up freelance work for any paying customer. It was murder for hire, and what became known as the murder machine.
Roy decided to expand the business into killing. Not just killing enemies, but now killing for the families. He'd take in any contract. He'd invite him to a party, and that would be the last time you see him. That's what Roy did. He expanded the murder.
1979 was a high point for the DeMeo murder machine. To cope with demand, the crew took the killings and dismemberments in-house. Now most hits were done in the rear of the Gemini Lounge, using a well-practiced method.
Now behind the Gemini Lounge there was an apartment rented by a guy named Joseph Guglielmo. They would lure their victims to the place and they would bring them in.
The victim would be shot in the head by Roy DeMeo, and the head swiftly wrapped in a towel. Chris Rosenberg would stab the victim in the heart to stop the bleeding. Then, the body would be left to drain for 45 minutes.
They brought him into the bathroom and put him in the tub. Then they cut the body up and put all the parts in a hefty garbage bag. After they got done cutting the body up and draining the blood out of it in the bathtub, they all sat down with Roy DeMeo and they ordered a pizza, and they were eating the pizza with bloody hands. That's how despicable these people were.
After a while, the dismemberment process became a sadistic ritual.
There was no need to do this. This was just, how would you say it, vicious evilness. I mean, mob heads normally aren't done that way. Why go to that length when they could just put a bullet in his head and dump him in the ocean? They did it just to be vicious. And that was DeMeo's doing because he was a psycho.
Despite killing nearly 100 people, Roy DeMeo could now do bigger and bigger deals. So he got involved in a major plan to export stolen cars to Kuwait. He was now an international criminal. Needless to say, several people were made to disappear in the process. But the plan netted him and Nino huge profits. In no time, orders for 5,000 cars a week were coming in via his contact in Kuwait. As a sideline, DeMeo was getting deeper into cocaine deals as well. Drugs were frowned upon by Paul Castellano, as they tended to attract attention from law enforcement. Nevertheless, mainly through crew member Chris Rosenberg, coke deals came thick and fast. In early 1979, Rosenberg went to Florida to buy some coke off a group of Cubans.
Chris Rosenberg goes down to Florida and goes to a narcotics deal for a kilo, and they're going to be delivering it to New York.
On his return to New York, Rosenberg made a major mistake, which would have massive consequences for DeMeo. The Cubans came to deliver the drugs.
They come up to New York to sell him the key. Him being the entrepreneur that he is, says, hey, I'm not going to pay them. I'm going to kill them. And he kills them. He winds up killing 3 people.
The Cubans' bosses were outraged by Rosenberg's actions.
When Roy found out this, he says, they're going to send an army up here, and he says, they're going to kill you. And they said, what name did you use? And he says, I went by Chris DeMeo. Roy says, my God, my family's dead. they're going to come up here and kill my whole family.
Rosenberg's killings risked an all-out Cuban war with the Gambino clan. In recompense, the Cubans demanded a scalp in what became known as the Cuban Crisis. So DeMeo decided to offer up a sacrifice. His friend, Chris Rosenberg.
So he decides Chris has to go. They stab Chris, he shoots Chris.
They had to make sure the Cubans knew they had kept their part of the deal. So DeMeo could not make the body just disappear. He needed a stunt.
Chris can't be dismembered. Chris has to be left, so it's going to make front page headlines. They parked him on Floyd Bennett Field, sat him in his car, put a 9mm between his legs, and then machine gunned the car. And yes, it did. It made front page headlines.
With Rosenberg gone, DeMeo returned to business. And he remained popular with his Gambino family boss, Paul Castellano, because of his specialist skills.
Roy wasn't going to get killed because Paulie needed his guns. DeMeo and his men were very, very well respected. And this added power to Paulie. Nobody would make a move on Paulie. So that's how important Roy DeMeo was to Paulie.
However, the Cuban crisis did leave a mark on DeMeo. He became paranoid the Cubans wanted to kill him. This caused him to make a major mistake. He mistook an 18-year-old vacuum salesman for a Cuban assassin.
Roy was so nervous about it that a poor Electrolux salesman going around to the houses in Massapee comes up to his house to sell him a vacuum cleaner. They chased this poor individual halfway across Long Island and killed this guy and then disappeared.
Despite the killing being in broad daylight, law enforcement drew a blank. No witnesses dared come forward. But this time, the Gambino family boss, Paul Castellano, started to get concerned DeMeo was drawing too much attention. Then, in late 1979, Castellano wanted to kill two made men in his family. So he instructed Nino Gaggi and Roy DeMeo to make the hit.
And the order was sent down to Nino Gaggi, kill him, and you do it. So Nino trusted his right-hand man, his top killer, Roy. So they set up a meeting with her father and son. They had them in the car, but the father realized this is not going to turn out well.
A local off-duty policeman saw the murders and gave chase.
A sergeant trying to raise money in his off hours driving a cab sees this flash and everything stops and winds up at a big shootout. Nino gets shot, Roy escapes.
The simple fact was that the murder and shootout involving a policeman was something no one could ignore. So at last, the investigators began to join all the dots between DeMeo and his crew. Between car crime and the numerous Canarsie murders. And between Nino and headman Paul Castellano. Then, the FBI made a key breakthrough. In 1980, a customs official working the docks spotted a consignment of cars destined for Kuwait. It appeared the cars had been stolen and given new registration documents. The intelligence quickly led to a warehouse. The FBI raided it to find it full of stolen cars ready to be exported by DeMeo to Kuwait. A fingerprint at the scene pointed to the DeMeo crew.
It just showed you the scale of the case. Here was a Mafia family not only selling stolen cars in Brooklyn, but shipping them out to another country. I mean, this was unheard of. This now became an international case. It became very interesting to everybody, and everybody wanted a piece of the cake.
By 1982, the pressure on DeMeo was stepped up. A new task force moved into offices at Foley Square, New York, to take over the running of the case. It was headed by top-shot prosecutor Walter Mack.
Walter is such a total attorney.
And this guy, Walter Mack, is one of the finest prosecutors I ever met, without any question. I mean, the guy had guts, and he's the one who put this whole case together.
The man that just throws himself into a case with his full soul.
Mack's task was to bring all the crime agencies together under one roof.
The team was put together of federal, state, local, city investigators.
The team soon included Joe Wendling.
We sat down, we sparked Walter's interest, and we asked Walter to make a promise to us that if he took this case, he would see it through its end.
Walter Mack did. And soon, it became very clear that what had started as a large-scale car crime case was turning into something even bigger.
The police department at the time had brought an auto crime case over to us. Really wasn't considered a Mafia case, although there was some expectation that the Mafia would emerge. It was pretty much an auto crime case.
As Mack and the team investigated further, Roy DeMeo's murder machine emerged.
And what happened in the next 6 months to a year was an extraordinary combination of motivated investigators who felt strongly that the individuals in the crew had evaded responsibility for truly heinous acts, and they were looking for some means and mechanism of perhaps drawing it all together.
Slowly and surely, Mack and his team built the case against DeMeo and his boss, Nino Gadji. This time, they were determined they would not elude them.
It was a commitment to the victims, the moms, the husbands, the wives, the brothers, the sisters, that it was time to bring justice to this situation, and that's what kept them going.
One tactic they explored was to pester DeMeo to see if he would crack. Soon, they had something to get him really worried. A major breakthrough. One day, the phone rang. A new informer, calling himself only Harry, professed to knowing all about the stolen car ring. Harry was Vito Arena, an associate of the DeMeo gang.
We take him into Manhattan on a Sunday night with nobody there except the U.S. Attorney and us, and we sit him down and we tell him what we want. We want all the information about the chop shops and the homicides.
Arena began to sing. and their jaws dropped.
Vito Arena sits us down for the next week and a half and fills us in on every homicide they did and how they did them and how they cut the bodies up. Says the easiest part of the body to chop up is the head. The head snaps off like a pencil. And we're like in awe of this guy. We never heard anything like this in our lives. And he tells us all about Roy DeMeo.
To prove his credentials still further, the informant pointed the team to one of the victims, Joe Scorney. His body was found just where Arena said it would be, in a barrel of cement at the bottom of a lake.
We find the body, it was all skeletal now. And there's the dungaree jacket, dungaree pants, and a wallet in his jacket. And by virtue of that wallet, he had his dentist's name in the wallet, which gave us the ID in about an hour.
As a result, Joe Endling was sent to the Gemini Lounge to confront DeMeo and to offer him a deal to see if he could be turned.
They knew Roy was involved in so many murders, so many killings, that he would be a wealth of information to the police.
Roy DeMeo was having none of it. Instead, Joe Wendling found it was DeMeo who was offering him a deal.
Roy said, "You're gonna take me down. You guys, you're old timers. Why do you want to get involved in it? $1 million, Swiss bank account, wife's name. Give me the former and go live like a king." I turned around to Roy and I said, "I'd sooner take you out of the trunk of your car." I said, "But come with us and I'll save your life." He said, "I'm a good soldier. I'm in the mob. And when they call me, I'll go like a good soldier."
With the case coming together well and evidence building up, it seemed like it was only a matter of time before DeMeo would be in court. Then a disaster that risked ruining everything. As the trial date approached, Roy DeMeo went missing. The police searched for DeMeo. Informants said he was seen on the streets looking paranoid and heavily armed. Then, the police took a call. Roy DeMeo, the ruthless murderer, was found dead in the boot of his Cadillac.
I went down there, when they popped the trunk, there was Roy, frozen to a chandelier. And I said, "Man, what a tribute to us. They killed him. They killed this man who was such a moneymaker to them."
His Cadillac car was dumped in the parking lot behind the Varuna Boat Club in Brooklyn.
Roy DeMeo died the way he lived, as a street rat in a fetal position in the trunk of a car. There is no sympathy or empathy or anything like that from anybody in law enforcement, including myself.
The obvious question was, who might have done it? For the law enforcement team, Gambino family boss Paul Castellano was the man with the motive.
Roy DeMeo was killed because Paul Castellano decided he was a liability. They realized we were getting close to him, to DeMeo, and they felt that if we were able to arrest him and incarcerate him and turn him into an informant, he would have brought the whole empire down.
Castellano was right to be afraid. Even though he was dead, DeMeo had left plenty of damaging evidence. Evidence that would bring destruction to the family. Soon after, the task force raided the Gemini Lounge, armed with a search warrant.
We call our people in and we take the bathroom apart, and in the drains we found the blood. Blood never goes away, contrary to what you might see on television. If blood is in pipes in a wall, the blood will remain there forever and identifiable. So we were able to do that. We were able to match the blood with the victims and the criminals and the whole routine. That's how we made our case.
This evidence led the team to DeMeo's boss and Castellano henchman, Nino Gaggi. The case evolved into US versus Gaggi. But Paul Castellano wasn't safe either. He too was called to face a trial. As the jury took a 2-week recess at Christmas 1985, Castellano headed out for a steak with a loyal associate. He was cut down by unknown gunmen.
So it was a setup. They bring him up there and they whack him as he's getting out of his car.
Paulie got whacked as a tribute to all of us and Walter, because of the fact we put in all the killers, all the top soldiers. This enabled them to kill Paul.
With Castellano gone, in a final trial, the remnants of the DeMeo crew and their capo, Nino Gaggi, stood trial for the remaining murders, including car thief Andre Katz.
It was not some case that was built overnight, done in a week. It was years of investigating, talking to informers, sending guys to Kuwait, and with the hard work of Walter Mack.
In the end, the worst killer the Mafia ever produced left as his legacy not only a crime family in disarray, but also something more chilling. Only a fraction of his murders had ever been solved. The truth is, we will never know the real number.
Roy bragged about 150 individuals, and I would say we're somewhere between 150 to 200 is probably an accurate number. I think Roy was extremely efficient and vicious in protecting his turf. We had people calling us, about their daughter that disappeared, who, hang on at the bars or stuff like that, and as to which we had no information.
As far as giving victims justice, that's kind of nebulous. How can you ever accomplish that? I'm of the school thinking that there is no such thing as closure for the families of victims. Roy DeMeo was as guilty of serial killing as any serial killer. Not only did he kill them, he cut their bodies up and defamed them and their humanity forever. This was a vicious, evil human being. If you could call him a human being, I wouldn't even call him that.
In missing several vital opportunities to stop DeMeo, the law enforcement machine must take its share of the blame. But that same law enforcement machine did eventually come together. Yet the overriding question remains: could it have done so sooner and found answers for the families of his victims?